Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Maggie and I have another special friend with me today.
Yep, my name is Ivana.
Yes, and so we're just gonna go ahead and continue on with like the topic conversations regarding like faith and like mental health. So let's get to it. Okay, Ivana, so I met you through Coin.
Yes.
And I want to say it was, I don't know, like a couple years ago.
I want to say it was in 2020 because it was at Magnolia. When Coin was at Magnolia.
Yeah.
That's when we first met.
I think it was before that. It
was
before the pandemic. Because wasn't the pandemic in 2019? No, you're right.
No, I think it was 2020.
You're right.
Because I remember Coin started in 2018 at the old building, and that's when I first started coming.
You're right. You're right. Okay. You're right. So
I got my dates down.
I know, and I'm like, no, it's 2019. Dang, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a long time.
So kind of walk us through like you being a believer.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that I would say the past 4 years I've been like walking like in my own faith, and it being like my journey, you know what I mean? And really sticking to it. Because growing up, I didn't grow up like in the church or anything, and so going to church and stuff wasn't really like a thing for me. My parents kind of were like in and out, so like I would go like once every like few months or like on Christmas or Easter where everyone goes, you know. But other than that, that was pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then when can you say that you like really found like your faith, like, okay, Lord, like I'm all in now, like I want to do all of this?
So it was about 4 years ago, and it was when I was at like my lowest point in my life with my anxiety and my depression. I hit like rock bottom, and that's when it all started. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise, for sure.
Dang, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure, blessing.
So like let's go ahead like and kind of transition into that. So like with regards to like mental health, right? Like, so obviously I can kind of assume that you struggled with that before your faith.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So how did that like start? Like, can you remember like there being a time where you're like, oh my gosh, like this is kind of where I can pinpoint that it was starting to hover?
Oh yeah. So anxiety itself, I feel like really stemmed, well, now that I know, it really stemmed from my childhood. There's a lot of, I just seen a lot of like drug abuse and violence and stuff like that. And so anxiety and depression didn't affect me through like high school or anything. I was completely fine.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I graduated high school, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I'm like, where did this even come from?
Yeah.
Like, and so I was going to therapy, and I was doing that, but nothing was really working for me. There was a point where I couldn't get out of bed. I was so depressed. I was having suicidal thoughts. Like complete, just like rock bottom. Like I was like, I need help, or like, I don't know, like I'm gonna die. Like that's literally how it feels, you know?
Yeah.
I was having panic attacks every day. I couldn't drive, and my mom was like, is this affecting your like everyday life? And I say, yes, like I can't function, like I cannot function. And so, she did recommend for me to go on like a medication, but I absolutely refused. I didn't want to go on any type of medication. I said, heck no.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to my dad, and my dad also struggles with anxiety, and so he's like, hey, why don't you go back to church? And I'm like, and I was so desperate that I was gonna try anything. Like if someone told me there was a healer around the corner that she could, I don't know, do something, I'm like, I will try it. I will try anything. So my dad was like, why don't you start going to church? Because he said it helped him. And so I'm like, okay. So that's when I started, really going to church, because I was just so desperate, At that point, though, not like, it was kind of selfish a little bit for me, because I was only doing it for me, like, because I didn't want to feel like that anymore. I didn't think about like having a relationship with the Lord. Like that was not even like in my mind.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I started going to church, and I really started like reading my Bible. I started, you know, going to church every Sunday, and praying a lot, you know, just kind of getting into the groove of like what that looks like. And I was still not feeling good. And so I would pray and be like, Lord, like, I'm doing everything that I thought that you need from me to like become a believer. You know, I got baptized. I was just doing everything, and like he still wasn't healing me. And I remember being so angry, you know, because I'm like, Lord, like, do you want me to just die? Because that's what it literally feels like. And so I was just crying, and I remember one time I came to church, and I was like on my knees, and I felt like, and I was just crying to the Lord, and I felt like this warm, like someone covered me with like a warm blanket. And so like I was like, okay, one, he's real. Because at that point, you know, when you're barely kind of learning about the Lord and what it looks like to have faith and everything, it's like we're human and we want to experience things tangibly and see things. You know what I mean? And so like for me, I'm like, if he's real, then, you know, do this, do that. Yeah. And so at that moment, I was like, he's real. Like, it's unexplainable, the feeling. And so a couple of months went by, but I was still just not feeling good. And I was like, Lord, like, you're healer. Like, why aren't you healing me? Like, I was, like, just so angry. Like, why, you know, I'm really putting myself out there to be a follower of Christ. And, like, I'm just still having all of this, like, I just feel like a hot mess still. And I remember, I forgot who I talked to, but they told me, you know, the Lord is just such a magnificent God, you know. He created people with like brilliant minds to create cars for us, to create planes for us. He's like, to create medications if we need them, you know. And so I kind of really was like, you know what, then I'm gonna try to go on a medication, right? I'm like, there's no, you know, I don't know why it was so shameful to like try any type of medication. And at that point I was like, Lord, you're like healer of all things, like you can heal me, you know. And so I ended up going on Lexapro, and then from there it was like night and day for me. I was able to focus, I was able to just be, you know, a wife, be a mom, and just like calm my brain down. I feel like it was just like on overload every day, you know. So that's kind of how it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because I feel like if I didn't hit that rock bottom, I honestly wouldn't be like where I'm at today with like my faith. I feel like I would have still been in that party mode, going out all the time, you know, getting wasted every weekend. Like I feel like I would still be in that, and I wouldn't have ever stepped inside a church. But it's like I was so desperate, you know. So I look back and I'm thinking like, Lord, did you do that? Like, was that is that how you snagged me up in here, you know? So it is a blessing in disguise, but in the midst of all that, like there's so much beauty that came out of it, because one, I'm a believer now, right? Like I feel like for the past 4 years, like I've just really put God like in the forefront of my mind, going to church and, you know, really wanting to raise my kids up in the church and everything like that. So like that was a blessing. But another thing was the Lord always kind of spoke to me and kind of saying, you know, because I was like, me, like, Lord, like, why am I feeling like this? Why am I? The Lord, like, just come right in, like, this is not about you.
Wow.
And I was thinking, like, what does that mean, you know? But when I look back, I have, because of what I've gone through and like how I felt, like if you don't know what anxiety and depression feels like, it's so hard to talk to people that don't know what it feels like, you know. So there was so much beauty out of all that, because of what I've been through. I'm able to connect with a lot of people on a much deeper level, you know, and I'm able to like you know, they share their experience, I share mine, and we have just this better connection. Then of course, like I saying like I'm a believer and all that stuff, and like I've just been able to connect people with people a lot better. And it reminds me of when Jesus, you know, came on this earth to experience what we go through as humans, you know what I mean, to connect with us on a deeper level, because he's like, I know what you go through, you know. That's so good. So that's kind of like the gist of it.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I love that. I thank you for like just even being so open with that. And I think you had mentioned like you're able to be a better wife and a better mom, and I think so many times like even with mental health, like I hear a lot of like it's kind of more so like from a single perspective as opposed to like a married perspective, you know. And so I really just want like to just even like highlight that, because I think there's like a lot of people that like they're married and we don't hear really how that even affects the marriage. It affects the dynamics with their kids, like all of that. So can you kind of like walk us through, and obviously whatever you feel comfortable sharing, but can you walk us through like how mental health affected your marriage?
So in that aspect, you know, I thank God that my husband is just so supportive. Not once through my whole, because when he met me, it's kind of when it started. So I was struggling with it. You know, we would want to go out, but then I'd be like, no, like we have to stay home. Like I didn't want to get out of bed. And so he would stay there with me. He was just so supportive from the beginning. And you know, I would tell him what I needed. Like, I need you to give me a hug right now, or I need you to like leave me alone, you know? So I think that was just him understanding and being so, you know, supportive with me, because I feel like in a lot of marriages, I know a lot of people too that kind of have that dynamic too, where one person has a lot of anxiousness and the other person doesn't, and they just don't understand, you know, or do anything to kind of help the situation. So in my case, I'm just thankful that he does. So it really didn't affect like our marriage really at all. I would just say, hey, like I'm really anxious today, and he'll be like, okay, well, you know, if you want to go to the room, like I'll handle everything. Like it was more like that. But yes, I know it. I feel like if I was in a situation where he wasn't so supportive, I would probably spiral a little bit more, because you need that, especially when you're in that state of like just anxiousness, like you need that support, you know? So yeah, for me personally though, it didn't really affect my marriage at all.
But I think you mentioned some things that I think are like really worth highlighting, was that, and obviously we're kind of gonna go a little bit of a side tangent with like marriage. But I think it's really important what you had mentioned, like communication.
Oh, for sure.
You know, communication, and then just to like be open and willing. You know?
Exactly.
And so I think even just the fact that your husband was willing to be like just kind of selfless. Right? And so I think even like for the audience, like if there's married couples that are going through this, like it is very important. Communication is key.
Oh, for sure.
And not only that, but like for the other partner on the other end that probably doesn't understand or doesn't resonate, like for them to be like open, and just like for them to be receptive. Because I think oftentimes if the other party is not being receptive and they don't understand, of course it's going to be way harder for the other partner to let me communicate and let me be vulnerable with you. And so I think that's very key in like, especially when you're going through that, because you guys were able to navigate that, you were able to communicate, and he was able to receive.
And I think that's a lot of relationships, one of the biggest issues is communication. You know, and I feel like as a person that deals with anxiety and depression, you know, we have these feelings, but we don't communicate to our partner that we're feeling these feelings, and it's like they don't know, you know, because with anxiety, like you can look completely normal, completely fine, but on the inside you feel like you're just dying, you know. And so absolutely, communication is, and I think that's the one thing that we've always we've always had really good communication since the beginning. So I think that really helped us navigate that situation. And then him being so selfless, you know, I remember his dad bought us Universal Studio tickets to go, and we were gonna go, and I was getting so anxious, like I thought I was gonna pass out, and like we ended up not going. And his dad was like, "Oh, how was it?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, it was fun." So just being selfless, you know, as a partner. And I think it really helps to really kind of research, like, okay, what it is if my spouse does have anxiousness, like what can I do to help, you know, because some people might think they're helping, but they're really making it worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's really good. Thank you for sharing that insight, because again, I feel like a lot of people overlook that whole conversation of mental health within like the like a marriage context, you know. And obviously you're a mom.
Yes.
So obviously we know kids in general, they can be a handful sometimes.
Oh yeah,
but
especially
I think Mason and Charlie, we love you guys.
Yes.
But I think with mental health, it's like a whole, I think, different ball game.
Oh, it's a very different ball game. So I was dealing with this was before I had kids. And it's funny because I was so anxious to have kids, because I'm like, how am I going to handle being anxious by myself? And then on top of that, I have like 2 little ones, or well, Mason at the time, you know, that we're going to have Mason. How am I going to handle this, you know? And yeah, it's tough, because like when you're in that anxious mode, I guess you can say, like you're very snappy. I remember like my kids would be, I don't know, running buck wild, and I'm like, you know, kind of yelling, or, you know, I just you get irritable a lot quicker, you know, or I'll just want to be alone, and they're like, you know, knocking on my door and bothering me and stuff like that, and I'm like, go away. So that was really hard to navigate, and I remember just praying, like, and I would go to the room crying, like, oh, like, why am I dealing with this, like, all this, Lord? Like, I just want this to go away. I want to be a good mom, you know. I don't want to be, you know, snappy and irritable with them. Like, how, you know. And so I remember the Lord just telling me, like, you know, you're a good mom. Like, you know, you're a good mom. Don't worry about it. And it's so funny because that night I had a friend text me, and shout out to Michelina, and she said, hey, like, for some reason, I just have to feel like I have to tell you, like, you're an awesome mom. Like, you're such a great mom. And I knew that was from the Lord. And I was bawling. I'm like, oh my gosh, Lord. Like, you know, because I was doing just the best that I can with you know, how I was feeling. Like, it's just it's so hard. But then on top of that, too, there was a point where I did get off the Lexapro, and I felt like those were the times where I did feel a little more irritable, and so I ended up actually getting back on them, and they really helped me, honestly, to just be like stable, I guess, like, you know. Ever since I've been back on it, I feel more normal, you know. And it's funny because recently I've been thinking about getting off of them again, you know, because I feel good, like I feel normal, and so we've been fasting, and that's something that I've been fasting about. Cool. But I'm like, shoot, I don't know, man, because I think I texted you, the fast where I just started having like anxiety, like. And I don't know if anyone has fasted before, but every time I fasted, I feel like a sense of just so much anxiousness, like where I would walk into church and just anxiousness, like, oh my God. So definitely power of prayer with that one, because I did reach out to a lot of people, and like I honestly did feel better after, like the next day. You know, everyone was like, I'm praying for you and all that stuff. But yeah, with kids, it's I think it was the Lord just really reminding me, you know, that, you know, I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm like, Lord, give me patience today, Lord, give me patience today, you know. And he did. I did feel like a sense of like peace and calmness, and I'm like, okay, like I can do this. And then him just giving me that reassurance of like, you know, you're a good mom, like, because I'm like, oh, I'm such a crappy mom, like, why am I yelling at my kids for, you know, they're kids, they're gonna run wild, you know. So I think, and also me just really sticking and being in my word, and, you know, praying a lot, and just keeping the Lord at the forefront of my mind really helped to just navigate that too.
Because then because I know you had mentioned, like, when before you were pregnant, those like were the challenging things. And so obviously, like, now they're getting bigger, and obviously I know you're busy as a mom, you have them in sports and all that fun stuff. So how do you navigate? And obviously you mentioned you're back on Lexapro, and it's like kind of help like stabilize certain things. So in terms of just kind of like busyness with like just mental health and all of that, like how does that look like now?
I do notice that I do have to have times like to myself.
For sure.
So every day I love reading, whether it's the Bible or not the Bible.
Yeah.
So I always will go to the room and like just have like a quiet moment to myself, or even I always just try to sneak those moments that I can just do what I want to do, just like relax and just not have to, you know, hear kids yelling. So like today I went to the room, I closed the door and I took a nap, and I was just doing some self-care, just literally doing nothing, you know? And I think that's just so important to just do things that you like to do, you know, or go hang out with friends, or, you know, take that time away, because like I'm not just a mom and a wife. I'm Ivana too, you know what I mean? And it's just really, you know, just doing things you like to do, you know? And so that's so important for sure. You know how I said there's the beauty in the disaster, you know?
Yes.
So I feel like I've noticed, and we actually did a class here at Coin.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay. Yeah. I think we did it. We got the book, and it was like kind of going back to your past.
Oh yeah, the emotionally healthy woman.
Yes. Okay, so honestly, from that point, I think really digging in, figuring out, like, you know, people don't just get anxious for no reason.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think it's so important to really not just, you know, take the pill and forget about it. It's so important to also, okay, Lord, like why am I feeling these feelings? You know, it's so important to figure out, okay, like, where is this coming from, you know? And I think a lot of people just kind of like to sweep that under the rug and not deal with any type of like emotions and stuff like that. And so I feel like the Lord, like during when we did that,
the class?
Yeah, the class, it really helped me to like dig deep into like, okay, like, you know, why do I get like so anxious when people argue? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's so much, there's so much stuff that I just had to deal with, and you know, the Lord really put that on my heart to really dig deep and to go through those things, you know, because that ultimately that makes me like stronger as a person, because I've dealt with that stuff, and I'm not as anxious because I'm going through all those emotions and all that stuff. So I just wanted to point that it's just so important to like figure out the why, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
And go through that, and it's so weird how it happens, because I mean, for me personally, you know, growing up, my dad was a drug addict, so there was just a lot in that. You know, I remember like hoping he would be at like school for a play, and like he just wouldn't show up, and he would tell me he was going to pick me up and he just wouldn't show. And I feel like I carried a lot of those like abandonment like emotions, I guess, as I got older, and they didn't hit me until you know, right after high school. And so you know, kind of putting on my heart and kind of really just speaking to me about was going back and figuring out why I'm having all these anxiousness, you know what I mean? And so when we did what is it called again?
The emotionally healthy woman.
Okay, yes. So emotionally healthy woman, it really had me like dig deep in my past, and it just exposed so many things that I didn't know. That, you know, issues that I was dealing with that I didn't even know I was dealing with, which was causing all this anxiousness. And I did want to bring up just the whole where Sammy was talking about, you know, it's so important for two people to be emotionally healthy when they become married, because that bleeds into their children. And when two individuals come that are not emotionally healthy, you know, it's kind of disastrous, because they're kind of they're battling their own battles. You know what I mean? And so for me, the Lord was just like, Ivana, like, you got to deal with all these issues, you know, and everything that you dealt with when you were a kid, and things you saw, and like you really just have to deal with that, because, you know, if I'm healthy, emotionally healthy, that's going to pour into my kids. That's going to pour into my marriage. You know, I'm going to be more patient. I'm going to be more kind. You know, I'm not irritable all the time. You know, and so that's one point I really do want to make, is that you can't just like put things under the rug. You really have to. And that's what the Lord, like, when you're, you know, sometimes I don't like to pray, Lord, like, show me things, because, do I want to know what those things are, you know? Right. I'm like, Lord, open my eyes. Like, what are things I need to do? What are things I need to change? And the Lord was like, this is everything that, you know? Yeah. But in the end, like, the Lord only just wants us to just, you know, just be healthy emotionally, you know? Because, you know, especially as a mom, because my kids, you know, kids are like sponges, you know, they everything that mom and dad does, like they do, you know? And so it's so important to just be emotionally healthy, so your kids see that and they grow up as well, and they're not growing up, you know, in an environment that's not healthy, and then they got to deal with a bunch of issues when they're adults, you know? It's just like a whole cycle, you know, that you...
And I think it's so good that you pointed that out, because I think it's always very important to ask those why questions, because sometimes when, because I used to struggle with anxiety too, and I mean, I still do, but like when I didn't understand what was happening, like immediately we get into like panic mode or like survival mode, because we don't know what's going on. And so I think it's very important, like when people are even feeling that, like it's important for them to like, okay, I need to ask the why questions, or I need to like talk to somebody and process this. Because I think that really like is kind of like the doorway, or like the stepping stone to like, okay, I'm getting help, I'm figuring this out. And I think oftentimes people don't do that, and so they just freak out and they go in like survival mode. And so I think it's really great that like, even though you're going through all these things, you still were like, okay, I really need to ask myself why now. Because there are a lot of things that we don't see it at the moment, but that we have been carrying for so long, that out of nowhere something causes a trigger, and then therefore that becomes kind of the byproduct, the anxiety, the depression, all of that.
Then you just spiral.
And not saying that that's for a lot of people, but for majority of the people, that can be how that like starts.
So it's always just a trigger, and you think you're fine, and the next minute it's like boom, you know,
and it's not.
The
struggle. Sorry.
And I think that you know, really just asking the Lord, like, you know, what are, like, even to this day, even when I feel like things are fine, I'm like, I just ask, like, Lord, like, what are things I need to work on? You know, what is, what can I do to change? Like, I just feel like there's always, you know, I'm not perfect. There's always something that, you know, I could work on better, you know, to make me a better person, you know.
So as we like are going to, or as we're about to go into a close with this, what is something or some things that you would want to encourage people that go through mental health, both whether they're single or they're married? Because I feel like this is definitely a conversation that can benefit both and. So is there anything you'd like to just kind of share, or like just some nuggets that have helped you in your journey?
I guess as a believer, I would definitely say to lean on the Lord like a lot more in those situations, because I found so much peace, you know, in those anxious moments. I would get on my knees and just pray, and I would just feel like this overwhelming sense of like peace. Really just leaning into that, because, you know, the Lord's there, and He wants to take care of you, you know? And I know sometimes we get in those like freak out modes, like your mind is just racing and it doesn't stop. And every time I start getting really anxious, I'm like, in the name of the Lord. That's what in the name of the Lord. Like, you got to declare, like, this anxiousness is not part of me. I don't want it a part of my body. Like, Lord, take this from me. Like, so I do say those prayers. And I remember Patty was the one that said, you got to declare it, you know? She's like, you got to declare that. So that's one thing I do, and it does help. And I feel...
because you're speaking truth over yourself.
And so really another thing is reach out. Like, you're not alone, you know? Really reach out to people. Anyone can reach out to me. Like, I'm willing to have conversations with people, because I know what it feels like, you know? And I know the emotions and the feel like you're dying and everything like that. So definitely, like, reach out and don't just keep it in. Because as a believer as well, like, I feel like there's power in prayer for sure.
Yeah.
So just having people pray review, put hands on you and stuff like that, it really, really does help. And you know what? I don't think there's any shame in also getting on any medication. Like, that's okay, you know, there's no shame in that. And that's one thing that I struggle with. I'm like, Lord, like, you're healer of all things. Why aren't you healing me? You know, what am I doing wrong? You know, but there's no shame in that.
Right.
So definitely if that's something that you need to do, I remember my doctor was just saying, like, you know, the wiring in your brain is just like in a crazy mood right now, and the medication just really helps it to just relax, you know. Just as long as she's like, be on it for 3 months and see how you feel, and you can get off of it. Like, it's not like, it's really not that big of a deal. And so that's one thing that I would also, you know, encourage, if that's something that you feel like you need, like, it's okay, you know. And then one last thing is just like, have faith, because like in those moments I was like, Lord, where are you? Like I feel like I'm dying. I feel like my world is just crashing down. Like, I can't think. Like, you know, I'm your daughter. Like, take care of me. And like, I feel in those, and sometimes moments I did feel like he just wasn't there, you know. But ultimately, when I just look at the bigger picture, like, he was there the whole time, and he created like, just like I said, so much beauty and so much just goodness out of that situation. So yeah, absolutely, just have faith that, you know, he's gonna be there even when you don't think he is. He is there.
Yeah, gosh, Ivana, like, this was such a rich conversation. So I just want to say thank you for just even saying yes to be on this podcast, or just the YouTube channel, for being open and vulnerable. And I feel like this is definitely going to bring perspective, and just even like, my prayer that just everything that you were saying, somebody's going to find comfort in this, and knowing that like, I am not alone, and like, now this is somebody in my community that I can go to and like process things with, you know. That, and again, like, talking about, we need to break that stigma of when it comes to like medication or just even mental health, like there's such a negative connotation behind that, but there's just so much beauty in community, in the body of Christ, and like you said, the power of prayer. And I feel like I'm so glad that you really highlighted that multiple times, even throughout our conversation, because people don't understand just how powerful prayer is, right? And there's just no judgment even in that. Like, we're just partnering with them, believing like this truth and whatever God is saying about who they are. Like you said, you're God's daughter, right? And so I thought that was really good that you even brought that up. But just thank you so much for just even being here. You guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you guys for just even watching it thus far. And again, I didn't even say this earlier, but yes, YouTube channel, Keeping It Salty. Make sure that you guys like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in our next conversation. Bye.
Let me pause it. That was good.
That was really good.